we already had a conversation on women in leadership, but that was, I think, focused on political leadership. But women are there on various roles. In fact, I've noticed that women are there in leadership in more roles which cater to science, technology, healthcare, academic roles, roles where brains are really more important, than roles where symbol and symbolism is important, where it is power, roles of authority. That is where men feel a little uncomfortable, where they can have, because in, this whole myth that masculinity, that power means masculinity, that is something that has to be, it is being debunked. But at the end of the day, we've seen where you cannot stop the women, where it is with the playing field is level, that is where we score normally. In India especially, we've seen in class 10 and class 12 exams, it is the girls who score the most. They are the toppers. And that is why we have a panel here representing diverse fields. We have somebody from politics, we have something from healthcare, we have people who are from the artificial intelligence world, people, the dean of universities. So we have a very diverse panel over here, people in public policy, where women are already leading, and our panel exemplifies that. But Professor Jenny, I'll begin with you first, because I heard your address with great interest. You were talking about artificial intelligence, but you and I have had a conversation on this in terms of the dangers of stereotyping women. We have labels saying that women are good homemakers, women do work-life balance, and also that women should be there for softer roles. Even when we are women are in cabinet, they tend to put women in roles of whether it is women and child development ministries. What about roles where the hard decisions need to be taken, where women can make a difference? India, of course, has been leading in this. We have a woman finance minister, we've had women prime minister. So in that sense, people have come up, but the dangers of stereotyping is something I would like you to talk about.
Yes, I think it's very easy for people to believe that women, for example, are more empathetic naturally and therefore stereotype women into particular roles. But of course, empathy is not a female characteristic, it's a human characteristic. There are men who are great at empathy and women who are great at empathy. There are men who are not good at empathy and women who are not good at empathy. The reason that we need women in leadership and in roles all across is because women are people with talent, and that goes right across the spectrum. And we shouldn't expect to see a particular characteristic be more available for female rather than male leaders. However, women have often had different experiences. And I think that by excluding women, not only do you lose half the talent of your population, but you also lose particular experiences that women have had, sometimes because we've been put into particular boxes. But the experience of being in that box, of getting out of that box, resilience and other things that have come from that experience is very valuable and is something that I think needs to be in the room.
Fair enough. Ambassador Mukherjee, you're of course in the Foreign Service, where we've seen, women also take the lead. Do you ever feel that gender has become an issue where, in terms of when you got the role on your merit, but people say, oh, this is, a gender diversity, appointee?
Thank you very much, Priya. Yes, I joined the Foreign Service in 1976 when I was just 21 and a half. It's an open competition, there are no quotas. The difficulties or discrimination is experienced later on within the service. Like for instance, if you're a woman diplomat, in those days at least, you were expected to behave like a male. In other words, you become gender neutral at that day and age if you want to climb up in the Foreign Service. So in the case of a woman, you would be expected to work in the embassy, to entertain, going home, there's no one else, you have to do the cooking, you do the entertainment. And when there would be visitors from India, you would be expected to take them out sightseeing, etc. So it was like many roles rolled into one. But the most important thing, which I realized was, never ask for flexi timings and never ask for a concession. Who did that, Priya? They were my male colleagues who did, not the women. And that is what I would tell my women colleagues in civil service, in IPS, Foreign Service, IAS. that we have climbed the way we have and made our nation proud by refusing to give up the fact that we are women, because we are women, that's why we are special. But at the same time, we can do anything which is asked of us because of that special quality. Priya.
Thank you for that. Professor Shilpa, just taking off from where Ambassador Mukherjee also left off, in terms of your, field of public health, healthcare, that is where, again, the point that I made, where merit comes in, then you cannot hold a woman back. It's only when symbolism or somebody else is deciding on the appointments, like a public position, is really where the barriers come in. Have you ever felt that the gender card in terms of your work life, or even in terms of, for instance, when you go to work, the clothes you wear, or the way, you feel that you're being judged on your appearances where men are not? Women have to do that something extra special in the workplace?
I think I'm a bit of an outlier where, my career path at Harvard has been successful just because I've had, there weren't many overt barriers. It was a very supportive, inclusive environment. And I realized that is a place of privilege, and I'm very grateful for that. But it also, we need to ask the question, how can we make that the norm, not the exception, right? How can you have an equal voice in the room where you don't have to always prove yourself that you deserve to be in the room, but that you can change the room, right? So in my field, in my institution, I really haven't had to face those structural barriers, but I realize that that is not the case everywhere. And I think we need to take that as a proof of concept. So when institutions invest in inclusivity, in supporting junior faculty, women of color, first-generation scholars who are women, they are investing in the institution's success. Because that's what success looks like, is when everyone has an equal role at the table.
So the equal role at the table should not just be, something that is symbolic. Deputy Marcela, I would like to ask you about that. Because there is a difference between power and authority, in terms of you may give the role and the title, but do women have the authority also? We are living in a world where only 22.9% of cabinets all over have women representatives. So how do you see the role of women in actually exercising authority when they have been given the power?
Yeah, well, today the woman leadership is close, linkedly to three major global transformation. First is, as I said, political parity. It has to be absolutely political parity in government and parliaments. That means in cabinets. Cabinets has to be the parity, a reality. And economy inclusion. Financing inclusion. I mean, women need to be included in economy, by the way, by the work and everything, with a lot of guarantees. And that guarantees has to be from the law, a powerful laws that protect them, their rights. That's it. And cultural change. That is the most difficult change to do, because all the cultural, patriarchal cultural is very rising in our societies. But with very powerful laws, we can start changing attitudes. And we can start changing different ways to see the life, to see the work, to see everything, and to participate with more safely. Because violence is always there. Not as an individual, not exactly always to the woman, but to the society. If we live in peace, as a woman, as a child, the society prosper. We share prosperity. That's what that would say that. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, I would also like to share with the audience that I anchor a show which is on women's issues. It's called We Women Want. And we had a discussion recently with young girls who are just graduating, and I asked them, what are your priorities in life? And interestingly, they all began with first was financial independence. Second was, having a kid. And third was, maybe marriage or, settling down. And they said it's just adjusting. So first we want to live our own lives before we adjust to somebody else's. So it shows today's priorities. A woman knows that really financial independence is the key to her total independence. And Professor Maya, you've done a lot of work in politics and public policy also. And especially in Southeast Asia, I've seen that you're an expert in this region. So how do you see in terms of what can we do in terms of the structural barriers? What needs to be done? What are the impediments that you see?
Great. Well, thank you. And that's just a perfect segue, I think, in question. The panel is on women in leadership. And I believe that far too often we're asking women individually to have leadership skills, but it's often the structural barriers that are impeding real participation. So, I teach at a school of public policy, and I have including some very, talented Indians, IAS officers, tech entrepreneurs. And I ask them, so what do you think are the sort of key drivers to development in your country? They talk about things like infrastructure and development. They talk about moving up the value chain. But the single most untapped structural impediment is getting women to work, and getting women to work in large numbers. And in particular, there's not a single country that has moved into high income status that has not moved to around 50% of women in the labor force. So this is not an inclusion issue, it's not a diversity issue. It's a growth issue. And for a conference and conclave that has talked a lot about India growing, the single most important, I think, untapped barrier is getting women to work in large numbers. So Vietnam is at 70%, China is at 60%, even Bangladesh in this neighborhood is at 44%, India is at 25%. So when you think about India growing for the next 2 decades, the single most important thing you can do is get women to work. So I'm going to say 3 things about what we know from the research of how that actually happens. So the first is that you have to invest in the care economy. So you talked about the women coming onto your show who want to enter and they want to make a big difference. So what are the structural barriers that they're going to face? You mentioned they want to have children and they want to work. And those 2 things right now are deeply incompatible in India, in the Indian context. 2 years ago, the Nobel Prize winner, Claudia Golden, talked about this in her research. It's the motherhood penalty that keeps women. So investing in the care economy is one. The second thing, and that's particularly important for this city that we're all sitting in, is developing safe transportation infrastructure, right? Getting people to be able to feel safe getting to work. And then the third thing is flexible career pathways. And AI is going to do this anyway. Gone are the days where we had one career and the career kept with us, stayed with us for decades. Typically, people make 7 career shifts when they're entering the labor force today. So we have to enable women to dip in and out of different kinds of careers, and there's lots of research on how that's done.
Professor Jenny, in fact, we were discussing stereotypes and labels, and Professor Maya also spoke about the care economy and how motherhood and careers, in terms of there is a little bit of incompatibility with the women. We do need to take a break in our careers, and that is not often taken kindly. A lot of people, when they're hiring women, they ask that question, are you married? Do you have kids? I mean, is that all behind you now? Can you just focus on our work? If you're not married, then, the question that men are never asked that question. Should men get more involved? What is the solution really over here? How do we, segue both the genders?
Well, it's a big question for which there's lots of different answers, and there'll be different answers in different cultures. But there are, I think, 2 really important things. Firstly, you do have to have good care structures, and that can look really different depending on the environment. But secondly, cultures that have become much more equal in terms of career progression have often focused on the role of men in caregiving, actually. And so making it much easier for men, for fathers to care for their children, for fathers to be deeply involved in taking time out of the workforce. Now, that's a cultural, problem. It takes a long time to perhaps get there in our heads, but I think that has a huge, makes a huge difference. I think there's another really interesting thing, though, and that is women, by virtue sometimes of their caregiving role, bring things that we don't always recognise that are business opportunities. I think that there's a wonderful story of a woman called Marion Donovan who invented the disposable diaper. She went to venture capitalists and said, I've got this great invention, and they all turned her away. And they said, I don't think anyone will buy it. And she said, I promise they will. So no one invested. She did it herself, and she sold her company for a huge amount of money just a few years later. It's a great example of a business opportunity lost because the people making the decisions didn't have the experiences of a broad variety. And I think, the message, if you want one, is, move over, boys, include women, and you will make more money. Actually. So this is my business school hat on. I don't think diversity is only a justice issue. It absolutely is. I think it's also just an opportunity that we're missing.
Thank you for that. Ambassador Mukherjee, you're also in a profession where perceptions matter a lot also. So in terms of the way, I like what you said about, the expectations that come, because you're a woman, you have to do that extra. You have to do your work, but you also have to be a hostess, you have to, look after the home. In terms of perceptions, have you ever had, in terms of the way you conduct yourself, the way your appearances, have you ever taken that extra thing to, convey the message that I'm here as an equal and not here because of some disparity or gender quota?
I think I never had to do that because it is well known that in India, there are no quotas, women quotas for foreign service, IPS, etc. We got in through merit. The issue only arises, as you said.
There are always unstated quotas. Even in office, there are no quotas. But there is always, even in the private sector, it should be seen as, equal.
Well, the issue is more complex than that. The issue is that if you're a foreign service couple and you have a kid, the male boss presumes that it is a responsibility of the mother and not of the father. Correct. That is something that was very, very unfortunate in my generation. In the present generation, I have to tell you, though you do your TV show, that it is now very difficult to get Indian girls to get married. And if you do persuade them, they don't want to have a kid. So the roles are completely reversed. They want to be financially independent. They may consider marriage. They certainly don't want a kid. In my generation, it was, you have a kid, you look after the kid, you're a diplomat, your husband is also a diplomat, the kid is sick, the babysitter runs away, it's not the father's problem, it's the mother's problem. If you would ask the male boss, he would say, you're the one who decided to be a mother, you look after your kid. That has changed now, and I think that's a great development in India.
That's a good note to end on. But Professor Shilpa, I would also, supposing I wear the devil's hat, in this case, in the men's hat really, and ask you that is the level playing field because people are becoming more aware and they are trying to, include more women. Sometimes the men feel that the field is slanted now too heavily in favor of women. Yes, we are righting a historical wrong, but is there also a chance that men are right when they complain that women are being given an upper hand in some cases just because they are women? Or do you think that stand has no merit?
I don't think so, at least in my field. I'm in the public health space.
Not in your field, but generally in terms of the workplace.
Right, right. I can see that definitely happening where, oh, you got this because you're a woman. And then to that I would say, no, I got it because of my brains. Not because of my biology. That still very much exists, and it's something that we have to break down. And I'm again lucky enough that I haven't had to face those battles. But again, don't apologize for who you are, right? Own your own your career, own your leadership, and your voice matters just as much as men's, right? So I remember people telling me, I grew up in India, and they said, well, you know, you have the reservation for this entrance exam, so it's unfair. I get that frustration, but at the same time, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be having this leadership panel. So I think it's important, and again, be unapologetically yourself.
Do not be apologized. Good. Deputy Marcela, your work is also your field, you know, it's politics. So there is a lot of public interaction, some amount of networking that takes place. Does being a woman be an advantage or a disadvantage?
Yeah, well, I have been in politics for more than 4 years. It doesn't look like, but it's true.
Okay.
More than 4 years. And sometimes it's a struggle, but most of the times, when you learn to how to negotiate it, how to move, and how to can tell what the other need, you can do more good politics. I'm from a state on the north, very industrial, in Mexico. And once I met a woman from India, impressive woman. She was the CEO of Pepsi Cola. Indra Nuri. She was in Monterrey, and she gave us a very magnificent speech about leadership. And that was a few years ago. It's about in the 18. And she was amazing. And she started to change the whole situation of Pepsi Cola with a lot of successful. What do I learn from that? I learned when she told us that they have to study each one what they need and what they want. If you understand that, you can handle all this situation in the environment of that company, or an environment in one political party, or an environment in that society. And women, we have that gift. We can see what the people want. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Maya, I take the same question to you. Do you feel that women in a public role, you know, whether it is politics or, you know, well, usually politics, where they have to network and reach, do more outreach, does the fact that they're a woman, is that a handicap, or do you think, especially in patriarchal societies, we faced it, but I think the field is getting somewhat equal, but do you still see that as a handicap?
I mean, I don't see it as a handicap in short, but can I just come back to the question that was asked earlier about the workplace and whether men are right to see this as a loss? So I just want to ask our audience, if you have children, so that's going to be primarily the people in the front, how many of you think that, or wish that you could spend more time with your children? And for the people at the back, which I know are mostly students, compare yourself to your fathers and how much time they spent in the workplace, right? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but if you answered yes, and the research shows that most men want to spend more time with their children, they don't like the economy of greedy jobs where you have to be out working 14-hour days. You are also gaining by women in the workplace and by flexible pathways in which dipping in and out, in which taking, to the point, men taking paternity leave is one of the most important ways in which the economy equalizes. So again, imagine you're an employer and you're looking to hire a woman or a man, and they're identical in every respect. If your expectation is that a woman is going to be child-caring primarily, and that men are not, your economic calculation is different. It's just simply different. And in a world when you're looking at those candidates and you're not differentiating on care, that's a different world and it's a more equal world.
I like the question that you asked because when I record my show, we have, of course, a lot of guys in the office who turn around and say, women have a choice in that sense. Look at it from the other lens, that you can do a career. If you don't want to be a career woman, you can be at home also. Men rarely have that choice. It's really something. If the woman agrees to be the earner, then yes, you can be a house husband. But it's really the woman's prerogative. So they're saying, see it from our point of view also. But I know time is up, but I would just quickly like to ask you all just one sentence answer, and I'll start with you and go work my way back. What is the one impediment that you have faced personally, or do you think women face?
I'm going to answer the question that's close to that, which is what advice would I give to young women in terms of structural impediments? And it's one that I haven't faced, but I think many people do. And that is the single most important choice you can make for making a career possible is to marry a feminist.
Marry a feminist. Good advice.
I will say that we have to have a balance. Between the public life and the private life. That means that, for instance, I am a wife, I'm a mother, I am also a worker, I'm a politician, because we are a multitasker. Women are multitasking. But I will say that the secret is to balance, to have a balance, and never give up. Thank you.
Have a balance and never give up. Professor Shilpa.
My advice to young women, it's okay to say no. It's okay to draw boundaries. It's okay to protect your time.
Ambassador Mukherjee.
My message is for Indian women, which is be independent, be financially independent. First of all, your first choice in life is to do what your mother was not allowed to do, which is to be independent financially and otherwise. And if you want to go in for marriage, marry an understanding man who's willing to take 50% of the burden, including in the kitchen. Thank you.
Good advice. We can see two people have advice on making the right choice in terms of marriage. Professor Jenny, you're last.
Very similar. The biggest difference I see between men and women when they're making choices about education, for example, is that men see an investment as an investment for their family, and women see an investment as being a selfish investment. I think that needs to change, and I think women need to see that investing in themselves and their careers is an investment for their family, and I think that really changes your mindset.
Thank you so much. As we see, we have a panel of women who are accomplished leaders in their various different fields, women who have broken the glass ceiling in stilettos and moccasins and chappals, but we reached there, we are here, and, well, deal with it. Thank you so much.